Okay, this is Christopher Parham, otherwise known as Ice Cube 57 on the Industry Forum, and I'm bringing you podcast number 2. It's just me again on this podcast. I presented the idea to a few people and asked for some input, and one of the topics that people wanted me to discuss is Lipo, or um, basically all of the lithium chemistry. So we have Lipo, lithium iron phosphate, and lithium ion. Um, to start off, each one of these chemistries has a place to to shine, and then other places it has no business being. First, we're going to start out with Lipo, and we're accustomed to associating Lipo with Hobby King Lipo, or basically almost any battery that you buy from Hobby King or the RC genre or the RC hobby. So anything that's made in a foil pouch type configuration, and that's later protected by metal or some type of heat shrink or something like that. They come in capacities from as little as zero point 0.5 amp hours all the way up to um, 20 and 30 amp hour foil pouches. Uh, Typically, this version of Lipo, when it's the good grade, it should be able to do 20C or 20 times, deliver 20 times its capacity in amps. And most of the time, this is their burst rating, but most of the Lipo from Hobby King has been derated by the forum to point to a quarter of its actual rating. So if you have a 20C pack, you need to treat it as a 5C pack. If you have a 50C pack, you need to treat it, like a 12C pack. So that would be the safest continuous rating that you can subject that pack to without any real ill effects. Yes, it can still deliver more power, but you're also dealing with more voltage sag and less performance, and there's a risk of the cell heating up and then gassing and then puffing up, and then it's no use to anybody at that point. The reason why we came up with these derated values is, we tested these packs in conditions like with our eye chargers and stuff, and so we look at the voltage curve and what the voltage is holding it under certain conditions and everything, and pretty much the only C rating that these packs were delivering a good voltage was at about a quarter of what their rating was. And again, like I said, they can burst up to their full rating for short periods of time, but they prefer to be at about a quarter of their rating. So a 5 amp hour 20C zippy pack would be happier delivering about 25 amps. Um, and so typically, to increase the amount of amperage that a Lipo pack can provide, we put more in parallel to increase the amp hour capacity and therefore um, increase the amount of output that that pack can provide. And so, but there's also different grades of pack. You have really, really low graded packs that are like 10C rated, but they typically deliver about 2.5C. And so even when you have the 20C Turnigy, we have like the multi-start packs now that fall under the same principle. Like, yeah, these are crappier sales or lower rated sales, but they still fall under that same rule of they give a quarter of their C rating. Happily, they can do higher, but you just deal with, more voltage sag. And more voltage sag means basically anything that's below nominal voltage. So if nominal voltage is volts a cell, it means that if it's more than a quarter of the C rating, it's delivering an average voltage that's below 3.7 volts a cell. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. So if you discharge this pack at 10C, it's going to be horrible. But if you discharge it at 2.5C, or a quarter of its rating, it delivers a voltage consistently above 3.7 volts over the entire discharge. And so, there's 10C packs, 20C, 30, 40, 50, on up to the much better packs like nanotechs and stuff like that. So, like nanotechs, they can typically deliver more power, but still that same rule applies. So they may be rated for 60C, but we have to derate 60C to about 15C. So it's and nanotechs they're typically a little bit heavier than the regular 20C or 10C packs, and they run cooler. They have lower internal resistance and everything. So, like going as I mentioned, internal resistance. Internal resistance is basically the resistance across the positive and negative terminals, and this is rated in milliohms. And so the internal resistance dictates how that cell performs under load. So if you have low internal resistance, you will virtually see no voltage tag, but a high resistance pack will show a lot of voltage tag, and so this is also a good indicator of C rating. So basically anything that's in between 1 to 5 is a good pack. 5 to 10, you need to keep an eye on it. 10 to 15 is definitely on its way out, and 20, you just need to go and take it out in the field and shoot it. And this is the resistance across each cell. So if you see 1 to 5 across each cell, you're doing good. But if you see 20 across each cell, then that's typically pretty bad. And so a lot of times you'll see, and this is not in every scenario, a lot of times you see smaller cells and smaller capacity packs have higher internal resistance than larger format cells. And this isn't always the case at all. It just depends on the chemistry and the type of additives they add, and the like, I guess, cell doping or whatever. That black stuff you see in lithium cells. They have different chemistries for that can deliver more or less internal resistance. So it's not the same across the board. But like I said, again, we're talking about the pouch type cells. And so higher C rating packs typically are heavier than low C rating packs. And low C rating packs typically have higher resistance. But also, like I said, so the game changer with these recent multi-star packs is you can have a low C rated pack with high capacity, and it also be lighter. So these new multi-star packs are 20% lighter than the regular Lipo packs that we're used to, but they have a lower C rating. So that means you have to put a lot more cells or packs in parallel to get any useful power. So the current fad now is the 10C multi-stars, and they come anywhere between 1.4 amp hours up to 16 amp hours. And the thing that's really been shining for e-bikes is the 16 amp hour packs. I've tested these packs at around 4C, 4.5C, and the reason they can deliver that much on a 10C pack is because there's 2 cells in parallel, and so when they're in parallel, that reduces their internal resistance by half, and so they're able to deliver more. And then so it's such a useful size that you only have to run 1P or one parallel or one pack in parallel So you can just basically series these 16 amp hour packs and have a kick-ass pack that can deliver about 65 amps, and you can have a nice e-bike pack. And so this is not, we were talking about RC Lipo here, but Lipo isn't limited to RC Lipo. It's also, they also have other chemistries. I believe it's NCM. So I'm just looking up to be sure. Not exactly sure what the chemistry is, but it's a high cycle count lipo. It doesn't have a high C rating, but it's high cycle count, and it's a respectable C rating that is actually useful. So, we're used to lipos having like 200 to 500 cycles, and these can easily do 1,000 to 2,000 cycles. Not to be confused with lithium iron phosphate, which is a totally separate chemistry, but these are typically in larger cells, like anywhere between 10 to 20, sometimes even 40 amp hours. And so these cells are larger format cells, and so basically you don't have to put as many cells in parallel that hold a decent C rating, and they're pretty good for people that want to spend a little bit more money up front for a longer lasting pack, and for applications that need a little bit more discharge than average lipo. And again, that's a touchy situation, because you have some companies in this chemistry that I'm talking about, that they have high C lipo, and then they have low C, and so typically the more cycles, like the low C variants typically have more cycles than the high C ones. And again, like I said, it can vary. We talk about 1,000 some odd cycles to 2,000 versus the 2,000 to 5,000 cycles versus in regular RC lipo. So that's another spectrum. It's like there's a wide spectrum of lipo that's out there, but it's one of those chemistries that you typically don't have to worry about too often, because the cells get so heavy and so unwieldy that you just really can't fit them on a bike. But for mid-range applications, like motorcycles, possibly, a golf cart or something like that, they'll be suited for that. Then you go to the other end, a large format lipo. And so we're talking about the battery that's in the Leafs or the Chevy Volt, the big format pouch cells. I think they come in 30, 40 amp hour varieties. Like the Nissan Leaf is 33 amp hour cell, but they put two in parallel for a 66 amp hour cell, and then they put two in series, and then they create these sardine can looking modules that are the size, basically the Nissan Leaf cells, or their modules are the size of a ream of paper, a little bit thinner, but they're the size of a ream of paper. And so those cells, they typically deliver a lot more in capacity. Their energy density is pretty spot on, but their C rating can kind of suffer. Like the Nissan Leaf cells are rated for, I believe, 3C. Sorry, I'm just double checking. Yeah, the Nissan Leaf cells are in a 2S, 2P configuration. They charge up to 4.2 volts. The average cell voltage is 3.8. And they can deliver deliver about 240 amps or 540 amps peak. So you have a 66 amp hour cell that can deliver, let's see, 240 divided by 66 is about 3.6 C, and it can peak up to 540 divided by 66, peak up to 8 C. So these are low C rated packs, but their capacity is so big that it ends up being a lot of amps. And these, you'll use these in electric cars. Some people are using them in motorcycles and stuff like that. So it's a very, LiPo has pretty good energy density. It's by far lighter than most of the chemistries out there. But when you come with this energy density and this high discharge capability, comes instability. And so the instability I'm talking about is the pouches. They're so fragile that you can easily damage it. If you drop one, you can easily dent the cell, or there isn't sufficient protection where if you hit the pack with something sharp, it'll cause the layers in between the cells to separate. Not separate, but to fuse or short, and it basically releases a large amount of heat. And then when it releases that large amount of heat, the electrolyte in the cell is a flammable solvent, and so that can catch fire. And so you typically have somebody occasionally might puncture one of these packs, and it starts hissing at them fiercely and emitting all this smoke. And if there's enough heat, sparks or whatever, that will ignite, and it'll be like a flamethrower, shooting fire out of this LiPo pack. But typically, if you respect the cells, house them in a certain location, house them in a certain location where they're protected from abrasion, from punctures, and you maintain sufficient pressure on them, and just don't treat any of these lithium chemistries. You just really just want to avoid just violent vibrations or just rough handling of these cells, because they're so fragile, and anything can pretty much set them off, and not necessarily in a dangerous sense where, like, if you're careless, the chemistry will bite you. But as long as you respect it, handle it appropriately, charge it appropriately, monitor it, and everything, then you won't have any issues with this chemistry. Like I said, it's compact, it's light, it puts out a lot of power in most situations, and if it doesn't put out a lot of power in the situation, either the capacity makes up for it, or either the capacity makes up for the loss in output power in amps. Like I said, it's just really hard to describe the perks and cons of it, because, like I said, there's just so many variants of LiPo that we can focus on. But typically, I've used LiPo on pretty much, I won't say all of my bikes, but all of my bikes in the past 5 years I've used LiPo on, and I never had a fire due to gross negligence. I mean, I've abused some packs. I've pulled a lot of power that I shouldn't have. I've had some packs puff up. But the only time that I've had a pack actually catch on fire is when I drove a nail through one. That means I actually provoked a fire out of a pack, but just by normal handling. And I mean, even misuse of it, like I said, not over discharging, but exceeding the discharge rating on the pack. I've even crossed the connections in my earlier years where I vaporized connectors and stuff. Like I said, LiPo gets a bad rap, and it's really from the people that are really careless, not abiding by the rules, and overcharging, over discharging. and everything. And talking about over discharging, the voltage range for LiPo is typically 4.2 to 3.0. So anything when you drop a cell past 3.0 is like irrecoverable damage. And even if you drop a cell below 3.5, 3.6, 3.5, 3.6 is the range that you typically want to stop discharging, because there's really nothing past the 3.5 volts a cell range. And the voltage drops off very quickly, but when it drops below 3 volts, it starts doing irreversible damage to where you might not be able to get that cell back up and charged properly. Um, and so typically a lot of the packs that you see that get over discharged, um, they stop holding a charge and they may bloat up. If you're pulling a lot of power from them while they're in this over discharge state, they'll tend to swell up and bust out of the pack and everything. And so that's why I think it's key for people to, um, when they get packs from Hobby King or any places, to do a discharge test so you see what the capacity is and conditions of those cells are as you first get them, and then if there's any weak cells or whatever, you keep an eye on it. But still, if you know you had good cells to begin with, you can normally maintain a pack because you know it's good. But blindly just hooking up packs to your bike, and just because it says it's going to give 5 amp hours doesn't mean it's going to give 5 amp hours. I've had some packs delivered as 4.2 on their first discharge cycle, and they never perked up. So that's another reason why we need to check these packs from Hobby King, and like I said, respect them and get to know your pack, get personal with it, discharge every pack, charge it back up, make sure there's no cells that are lagging or just look funky when they're charging, because that could indicate a problem down the road. Um, so, like I said, LiPo, typically they're pouch cells in a metal foil. They're they're sealed all around. They'll have a copper tab and an aluminum tab, and I think the copper tab is the negative, I believe, and the aluminum tab is the positive. But I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. So like I said, different manufacturers and everything tend to do stuff differently. They're very, very sensitive to punctures and everything. Um, they're sensitive to overcharging, but not as sensitive as you think. We have a longtime member, Live for Physics, otherwise his name is Luke. He has the death bite, and he's stated openly that he used to overcharge his pack. I'm not saying that it's a task. You definitely lose cycles or lose the lifespan of a pack by overcharging, but he said he used to overcharge his packs to like 4.4 volts a cell and was able to get like an extra amp hour or extra amp hour and a half into the pack whenever he went out to race. But he did that knowing what he was doing, and he pretty much kept an eye on and respected the packs to a certain extent. You're still raping it to a certain extent by overcharging it, but he kept an eye on it, and it was really um, not really safe with it, but he was well aware of the danger, and that was a risk that he took that just happened to pay off in the few times that he did use it. So they can take overcharging a little bit, and even me, I overcharge my pack slightly only because the full charge voltage is 4.2, and I slightly overcharge to 4.21 or 4.22, because typically by the time I get to my destination or where I ride, the voltage will slightly drop off to where it'll be exactly at 4.2. But if I just charge it to 4.2, by the time I get to my destination, it'll be 4.17, 4.18, and it's sort of like when you look at a big pack, that can be zero point 0.2 amp hours, I would say up to 0.2 amp hour loss per pack by not allowing it to fully charge as I do. So that's the reason why I do it. I wouldn't say there's the whole myth. It's not a myth. about charging the 4.1 or 4.15 volts a cell. Basically, this puts the cell in a condition where it's not stressed by such a high voltage to where you can get more cycles out of undercharging the pack. I don't know. The thing is, nobody's really held on to a pack long enough to have any real studies, but that's a myth that people do believe in, and it's worked for several people for for a few years, I guess. I've never held on to a pack that long. I normally buy a new Lipo once a year, and I give up my Lipo or sell off my Lipo at a discount, and it's not necessarily bad Lipo. It's just I'm always testing new things. So that's what I feel. That's how I feel on Lipo. Now moving on to lithium iron phosphate. This is a heavier chemistry and a safer chemistry, and it's well known to be in two different formats. Actually, three different formats. There's the pouch cell, there's the prismatic cell, and then there's the cylindrical cell. So the cylindrical cell is typically associated with headways. Um, Headways and A123, those are the two companies that typically produce cylindrical cells. The headway cells are like the size of like sausages, good German sausages or good franks. They're pretty beefy cells. They have screw terminals on each end, which allows for easy assembly with bus bars. And like I said, they sell battery kits that have bus bars and screws, and then they also have like these little holders that slip over the end of the cells, and you can build a pack up like Legos. The headway cells are good for 10C peak, but typically you need to stay around 2 to 3C continuous. And from what I've heard in my observations from multiple members on the forum is, if you want a pack that lasts a while and you can accept the not so good discharge capability of them, this is a good pack. If you want the pack to stay around for a few years, they're good for 1,000 cycles, I believe, either 1,000 or 1,500 cycles to 80% depth of discharge, or no, to 70% depth of discharge. And let me do that again. There, 2,000 cycles for 70% depth of discharge, and like 1,000 or 1,500 to 80% depth of discharge. So you get a lot of cycle life out of them. The voltage range on these cells is 3.2 nominal, and it can charge up to 3.6, 3.65, and they can run them as low as I think around 2.5 to 2.8. And the extreme cases, they can sometimes go down to 2 volts a cell, but nobody really does that. And again, it's like this is the loose information I've had. These are my iron phosphate cells that could get dragged down pretty far, but it varies by company. And so like I said, this isn't concrete information. This is my interpretation of the information over the years and my recollection. So the voltage dips down a lot. So typically, like if you had a 18S pack for Lipo, you would need like a 24S pack to have the same voltage, because it's a much lower voltage cell, so you need more cells to make up for that voltage loss. The electrolyte and chemistry of them prevent them from catching on fire in extreme situations. So people have overcharged them to where they started venting and shooting out electrolyte in this oily substance. People have shot them with arrows, people have crushed them, beat on them with hammers and everything, and they just refuse to catch on fire. I can't think of any headway cell that's caught on fire. The headway cells come in two different varieties. There's the 8 amp hour variety, which is a high discharge cell, and then there's I think 10 and 12 and 16 amp hour capacities. So there were several different selections, and typically um, I haven't used headway personally, but I've never found anybody that ends up with a headway cell that gives capacity. Meaning if it was rated for 16 amp hours, it gives almost 16 amp hours. And I think they rate these in certain ideal conditions that we don't experience personally ourselves. Um, but I've never seen one get the actual capacity. And the more that I hear about headways, it seems like they lose capacity not pretty quickly, but they seem to degrade. They'll still put out power, but they seem to degrade a little bit more rapidly than you think, especially with the cycle counts that they claim. So that's something else to think about. Um, the charge profile of lithium iron phosphate cell is, like I said, it's 3.2 nominal, and when you start charging it, it will stay at 3.2, 3.3 for a long while, and then all of a sudden it will rise very sharply. It does almost the same thing that Lipo does, but that trip that's in between 3. Let's say 3.4, 3.45 up to 3.6, 3.65 is very, very quick. So, you have to keep an eye on it. And it's not predictable because, like I said, it rises so fast that it's really, unless you're like looking at it on the scope, it's really hard to catch that rise. So, typically these lithium iron phosphate packs are used with BMSs because they also do something really weird. After you charge them at 3.6 or 3.65, they drop down in voltage. Some of them drop down in voltage and some of them don't, but when they drop down in voltage, they drop down to like 3.4 volts a cell, somewhere around in there. So you may have a freshly charged pack, you take it off the charger, and you can come back 20, 30 minutes later and you will have a significant voltage drop. But with most lithium chemistries, that full charge to nominal sometimes happens pretty quick on certain lithium chemistries, so that's something else to consider when you're thinking about that. And like I said, moving on to the other type of lithium iron phosphate cells, there's like the Thunder Sky, Calb Energy. These are like large format prismatic cells that are in like a plastic type housing. They're rectangular. They can be as small as a deck of cards or large as arena paper or even larger. And the capacity can be anywhere from 10 amp hours up to 500, 1,000 amp hours. These things can get honking huge. And they're really, really heavy. So, the chemistry is already heavy itself, but then you have all this molded plastic and everything that's weighing it down. But as far as like a pack that's easy to put together, it just easily slide up against each other, and you can bolt them together with bus bars. They typically have screw terminals or lugs, and you put copper bus bars in between the cells, and then they have like a little vent on the top in between the two cell posts. And they normally use these in electric cars. And like you never really see them in a small end like motorcycles. You might see like 60 amp hours in motorcycle, but the C rating on these packs suck. Like the Thunder Sky Calb Energy packs, they have like 2C discharge, 2 to 3C discharge, and they peak up to 10C for so many seconds. I've actually used these cells. I used a 20 amp hour variety. I had a Thunder Sky pack. And I purchased it from a company called Elite Power Solutions. And these were actually pretty good sales. I think they were like $125 for a 12 volt, 20 amp hour battery. which at the time was pretty good. And I think there's I think David Mossman on the forum on the industry Facebook forum is using them at 48 volts on his rig. So they're a good sell. And again, like I've had the cells new, and best case scenario discharge, I think I got into the low 19 amp hours, even though it was a 20 amp hour discharge. And it wasn't at like a heavy C rating. I think it was at like 0.5 C, and it still didn't deliver full capacity. And so, like when you look at 20 amp, like for most cases for the average e-bike, the 3C should meet most of your needs. But you know, we have people typically in the 60 to 80 to 100 amp category, so this cell is no candidate for a high power build, and plus the weight of it is pretty gnarly for a 20 amp hour cell when you can do a Lipo pack at a fraction of the weight. I think, to put things in perspective, I think I had a 72 volt 72 volt 20 amp hour battery that weighed barely over 22, 23 pounds, and the same pack with the Thunder Sky 20 amp hour cells weighed 44 pounds. So the chemistry is heavy, and this format of cell, the prismatic type cell, is pretty heavy. And like I said, there's not a lot of C rating. You're supposed to have a lot of cycles. And then they also tend to, like, if you don't clamp them and the approved hardware that they provide, they swell up when they charge, and they kind of shrink when they discharge. So they're supposed to be used under compression or between these compression plates, and so the compression plates keeps this pressure on, and it's supposed to, again, with compression, it keeps down the IR and yada yada yada. But you know, that's another thing that happens with them that you gotta watch for, because some people use odd cell count numbers and everything, and so they normally sell these things in packs of 4, or they have like some threaded bar compression plate funky rig that, you know, you just simply have to pretty much go by the book. And another thing for these cells, sometimes they have, like, some of the manufacturers have an activation charge where you actually charge them up to, like, you know, the full charge voltage is 4.2, not 4.2, but 3.65 volts a cell for the lithium iron phosphate prismatic cells, that you sometimes have to charge them up to 4.2 to do an activation charge or something to kind of, I guess, get the cell ready and prepare them for use. So that's another thing to look out for. But like I said, for most stuff for electric bike use, I would kind of stay away from it unless you can deal with a 48 volt pack. And even the 48 volt pack, they don't even fit in. You can fit you can use a 36 volt battery in like a regular rack bag or whatever, but the 48 volt, you definitely got to get creative in storing them. And the size of these 12 volt 20 amp hour packs are the size of 12 volt 10 amp hour batteries, or 10 or 12 amp hour batteries. So, you know, for the capacity in the same amount of space as a 12 volt 10 amp hour 12 amp hour SLA battery is pretty good. But overall, the weight, size, configuration, it just gets kind of clunky, and it gets hard to put on a bike. And going to the other lithium iron phosphate cell, we have two different types. Well, not two different types. There's another one. There's the ping battery. The ping battery is from a Chinese vendor, and the ping battery is typically a 2C pack, and it's made of a bunch of prismatic cells, and they typically have a low C rating, but you can coax a little bit more power, maybe 3 to 4 C out of them for short periods. But he typically sells them with a BMS that's pretty much around 2C, and this is like the all-in-one solution. The ping battery is the all-in-one solution, to where you have the BMS, the charger, and and the battery, and and pretty much a kit. The battery can be pretty big. It's definitely heavier than LiPo. For a LiPo pack of the same capacity is definitely way heavier. I mean, way lighter than the ping battery. But again, for the cycle count, there's people that have had several years on a ping battery, and they haven't lost that much capacity. Or the people that do use the ping battery and cycle it every day, they're getting multiple years, which is something that you would dream for on LiPo. And then, like I said, the ping batteries also have like this nice BMS that lets you know. Well, I think it's the signal out BMS that when every cell has reached 3.6 or 3.7 volts a cell or something along that fashion, a light comes on and lets you know that that cell is pretty much fully charged and that is bleeding it off to try to charge up lower cells. And if there is any cell that's not performing, it won't light up on the BMS, or if it does, it lights up later than the other cells. So it's kind of like a visual way where you can kind of keep an eye on the health of the pack. And then so this only happens when charging, and when it's fully charged, you start seeing the lights come on one by one. Um, one by one as the cells come up to voltage. So like I said, that's a good visual indicator. The only thing I don't like about it is you have it coming from China. It has to go through customs. I've heard stories of people getting their batteries in customs and open it up, and they've even cut the shrink wrap on the packs. Um, so, and a razor blade and heat shrink on a battery pack, that those things just don't go together. So that's something to think about, something that you have to consider when you order a ping battery. The chargers are typically slow. That's another thing that I really didn't hit on with LiPo. LiPo can charge relatively fast for the most part. Um, Lithium iron phosphate can charge. It's like a medium charging chemistry. You can charge it pretty aggressively, but they typically don't like to be charged too fast. And when I say too fast, like exceeding like 10 amps. And again, that's only with certain lithium iron phosphate chemistry, like and even chemistries with LiPo. The LiPo normally is charged at 2C unless you have like a really good pack that charges at 3C, 4C, 5C. I was even seeing some 10C nano packs that you can charge them pretty fast. The ping batteries, the largest charger that I think they have is a 5 amp charger. Again, I think I'm gonna check that while I can. So I'm on pingbattery.com, and they have chargers 2 amp, 2.5 amp, 6 amp, so they don't charge very fast at all. And this voltage range, I've had him make me a pack for 12 volts, but I don't see it listed, but they make packs for 12 volts all the way up to 60 volts. And then also he does like 72 volt packs where he basically sends out two ping batteries, and you can manually series the leads, and then he has like a parallel charge cable where you can charge them in parallel, and then you can also parallel his packs through a diode for more range. And then so it seems like recently, like this past year, he has more, well, he has a better BMS on it, so that's a good thing. And shipping time is respectable. It's like 7 to 10 days. The warranty is pretty good on them, and even if you're outside of warranty, they've been known to work with people, even send replacement cells out and stuff, so you can repair your own battery. So that is a good vendor if you kind of want a low household arrangement. So that's ping battery, and then so we have the ping battery, which is, like I said, it's a lithium iron phosphate chemistry, but it's on the low C rating and about 2.5, about 2 to 4 C, I would say. 4C peak, and using it at 4C would definitely wear the pack out a lot. So, and moving on to the other chemistry, A123, this one comes in two varieties. And so there's the 26650 cell, which is basically looks like between a C and a D size battery, and these are typically 2.6 amp hour cell, but they can deliver up to 70 amps, and that's like fucking crazy. Um, Crazy amount of power. So, you can have a relatively small pack. Like I think they use like a 2S2, not a 2S 2P pack, but like I think it's a 4S or 5S 2P pack, and they were able to crank a car and fit in the palm of your hand. And they use these same batteries in motorcycles as a replacement battery for the onboard battery for motorcycles and everything. And these, like I said, they're made by A123, and the original source used to be from DeWalt 2 packs, like the 36 volt DeWalt 2 packs, is what people used to harvest the cells from on for the A123 cells. And then I guess some vendors started getting actual raw cells. So like the A123 cells back in the day used to be, the regular cylindrical cell with the cardboard. It used to be like a white cardboard with blue stripes on it. And then they started releasing newer cells, which ended up being this green cell with heat shrinking on it. And one of the things about these cells is like they don't have any real indicators on what is positive and what is negative, so it just looks like a uniform cell. But there's like certain indicators that do let you know. It's subtle, but to the average person, they couldn't tell you what's positive and what's negative on these cells. Um, when they harvest them from the DeWalt packs, they typically were tab welded. So, they were spot welded with these metal tabs and everything. So some people tend to leave those intact and then solder in bus bars or weld in bus bars, and like I said, again, scale them up series parallel to get their voltage. And, these are relatively small battery packs that can dump out a lot of power. This is like the premium of the lithium iron phosphate chemistry. And they have their own proprietary compound or whatever on how they make these cells, and nobody else has really been able to match their output quality. And again, like I said, there's two different types of cells. I told you about the cylindrical cell. There's actually a middle ground cell on A123. I believe it's an 8 amp hour cell, and it actually has screw terminals, and it's orange in color. Um, just looking it up real quick. Sorry for the pause here. So there's the 8 amp hour, and I thought it was some of them are orange and some of them are green, and then they have screw terminals on the end. They actually have posts that thread on nuts, and then you can hook these up with the bus bars and everything. And these are 8 amp hour cells, and I'm not sure if they're rated as high. Um, the cell format is 32157. And there's a vendor, OSN Power, that sells these occasionally. And I'm not exactly sure what these are used for, or what they came from, or what they were made for. But that's another cell that a cell that A123 makes. And then we also had a prismatic, not a prismatic, but a pouch cell from A123, and they came in two different varieties. I think they were 16 amp hour and 32, and 16 amp hour and 20 amp hour. And so the 20 amp hours, if you actually found a vendor that actually was legit and had A grade cells, you got 20 amp hours. And then for a while, you start seeing B grade cells come up where they gave like 19 amp hours and some change. And as far as the 16 amp hour cells, I don't know a lot of information about those, but they typically have the same amount of power. Um, same chemistry, same type of C rating and output power. Um, let me look up the C rating for the prismatic packs. Not the prismatic, but the pouch shell A123 packs. Oh, let's see. I'm finding a lot off the top of my head. 3.3 volts, 20 amp hours nominal if you get a good battery. And they have super wide tabs on them. And there was a thing back when they first started, like you started getting, it was like A stock, but used A stock. They used to, like the tabs used to be really, really short from when they were cut out of whatever application they were in, and then you start seeing sales pop up with full tabs. And then so we were like, hell yeah. And then after a while you start also seeing like B grade sales pop out, but the B grade were in such bad shape. Like, you used to have like they were bent, they were bowed, they were, normally the cells are pretty stiff. Some of them had wrinkles, and so like you had a few vendors that were just screwing a lot of people with these like I would call them C or D grade sales. They were just like screwing a lot of people, and people couldn't get their money back and stuff like that. So there's vendors on eBay that do sell the A123 20 amp hour batteries. They do pair them with the BMS. Particularly the BMS is a piece of shit. Like 40 amp hour BMS, 40 amp BMS, when we know the cell can put out a lot more power. The spec on this cell, it says it can discharge 600 amps continuously. So out of any lithium iron phosphate chemistry, 600 amps is a ton of power to come out of a 20 amp cell. So 600 amps divided by 20, that's a 30C rated cell. So A123 is typically running about 30C. So like if I said that the 2.6 amp hour cell could do 70 amps, or 70 divided by 2.6, that's 2060. So they're pretty high quality cells that can deliver the punch, but you pay a premium price. And with the A123 companies, slightly, I won't say they're going under, but their structure of that company is not what it should be for us to rely on them to even make these cells available to the public, let alone be in business. Another thing that A123 is known for is the kilocycle, which is like the fastest drag motorcycle on the planet. And they use A123 cells, and I think even White Zombie is either using the packs, or he did, I believe he used the packs from the kilocycle on one of his drag runs, and then he eventually switched over to lithium. I'm not sure if it was A123, but he did use it at some point. And the White Zombie was a Datsun with a Zilla controller, and I think it's one of the warp motors or something. It's laying down a ton of power, and it's fast. It's up there with the Tesla. It might be under the Tesla as far as speed, but it was just smoking ice cars up and down the drag strip, and is also an everyday driver. So that's another thing that A123 is good for. And so I think that's it as far as the mainstream lithium iron phosphate categories. Also, well, I got one more thing. There was a guy on the forum that used to make these circuit boards to where you could stack the A123 cells together, and you'll put the tabs in the circuit boards, and screw down these little clamps to where it was almost like a solderless way to make your own A123 pack. So, you know, originally from people having to solder or bolt them together to this nice circuit board that someone started, and then I guess some of the Chinese vendors end up copying to make their packs. So they're a lot more friendlier than they used to be in the beginning when we started using them for EV usage. Um, Going on to lithium ion, I think when people think of lithium ion, we start thinking about the cylindrical 18650 cells, and so they use a slightly different chemistry, and they're typically not high rated cells, not high C rated cells. They still fall into realistically the 1 to 3C category. Some of them can burst up to 10C, and then also their voltage range can be a little bit funky too, so they can charge up to 4.2, and then some of them discharge down to 2.0. Um, the amp hour capacities range from, you know, 1 amp hour up to 3.3. I mean, somewhere in the low threes with certain Panasonic cells or LG cells, like 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Those are the cells that's the highest that they get. There's certain different varieties. You definitely have the cheap run-of-the-mill ones that can run some basic flashlights and stuff. Earlier packs that were on eBay were made of 18650 cells, and these were like shitty cells. They were like 1 amp hour cells that they were making these huge packs from. Like, you'll have a 20 amp hour pack with 20 cells in parallel. So when you have that many cells, period, let alone 20 cells in parallel, there's a lot that can go wrong. But since we started getting higher quality cells, we're reducing that down to anywhere between 3 to 10 cells in parallel, just depending on what application that you use them for. Typically, people typically go to like 5 or 6P so they can get a realistic 40 amps out of it. Otherwise, you know, we're talking like cells that can deliver 5, 6 amp continuous, and then there are certain cells that can deliver up to 30 amps peak. But like I said, we're looking at a voltage sag that's like super horrible, like 2 something volts under their continuous rating, and their peak rating, let's not talk about what the voltage is on that. So typically on a small pack, let's say on a 5 or 6P pack, you can have a huge voltage swing. So like on a 48 volt battery, you can see like, you know, anywhere between, I would say 5 to 8 volt drop across that pack when it's under load. And then also there's the problem with the cells heating up. When you're pushing those cells to the limit, they start getting hot, and so that degrades the cell a bit. There was a company, I believe it was All Cell, that created this wax matrix to pull the heat away from the cell to where it can sustain a higher power for longer. But the packs are very, very expensive. They're worth it for most people, but they're very, very expensive. 18650 is also, it's a light format. I mean, like when you sit down and assemble it and you finally finish a pack, it's very light for its size. So that's another plus when it comes to that. People have been stealing 18650 cells out of laptops. You know, they'll find old surplus laptop batteries, strip off the casing and salvage the cells. That's one way that you can harvest cell. You can buy them direct or buy them through certain Alibaba or eBay vendors and buy them in bulk. Typically, like the cells that people really use are somewhere around 2.2 to 2.6 amp hours for average packs. And for really, really good packs, where you start using the higher quality cells, but you do pay for those cells. So typically, like the 2 amp hour cells are going for like $2 to $3, and the higher end cells that are 3 amp hours are sometimes going up to like $4, $5, $6 a cell. So it can be real expensive real quickly. Um, there are several ways to assemble these packs. You can solder them, but that tends to do something to the electrolyte and compound of the cell if you're not quick about soldering it. There's tab welding, which we've had a lot of people on ES building tab welders or buying tab welders or even offering tab welding services. And then it's basically when you tab weld, you're basically taking a nickel strip and you create, it's like these mini wells, and you typically do about 4 or 5 of these mini wells to each side of the cell and string, you put them, make your series of parallel groups. And the good thing about the cells being round is you can kind of stagger them so like a honeycomb pattern where you can make a real nice compound pack, and it's like hassle-free in assembly. They also have little cell holders, these little plastic cell holders, but I feel, after you buy all the holders and then you assemble the pack, it does seem like it wastes a lot of space when you can make it a little bit tighter, a tighter configuration. So that's something else to think about. Also, the 8650 pack is you have counterfeits, and so lately, I don't want to say lately, but on eBay you would find counterfeits under the Ultra Fire, Trust Fire, basically almost anything with the fire in the name, and it's a battery. Is more likely a fake battery or a rebadged battery, where it's like maybe B or C grade cells, or even people have been bold enough to take the cells, fill them up with flour, and then put like a mini Lipo pack inside that may be like 1 or 200 milliamp hours, or they surprising or not, they make round Lipo cells, and like I said, they fill them up with flour and drop them in the cell, and they'll solder one lead to the negative and solder the other lead to the positive, and fill the rest of the cavity with flour. So you'll have 2 cells that you think are identical. One will be super light, and the other, either it'll be super light or be almost very, very close. But if you take it apart and you dump out all this flour, and you see like this mini battery inside of a battery. So there's fakes in that aspect, and then there's people that, Panasonic or LG, have certain color codings or wrappings or text or or whatever on their cells, and you'll have somebody rewrapping cells to make it look like a higher quality cell. Another thing to look out for is I think that's pretty much it on the things to look out for with the 18650 cells. What I also wanted to elaborate on is back in the day when I first started e-bikes, there used to be a Sony cell. I think it's like Sony 18650 VT or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm doing some research on it now. There were 2 types of Sony cells, and one of them was a cell that can put out a nice constant power, and then one of them was a higher output cell. And like the one that had constant power, it actually delivered pretty decent amps. I mean, did pretty decent capacity at 10 amps. And then the other one delivered more amps, like let's see, it was 18650V, which were used in Makita packs. and they were like 1.5 amp hours, I believe. And then the 81650 VT, they were also used in Makita packs, but one of them put out a higher current. Let's see. I'm looking at 18650V. It was 3.0 to 4.2 volts, 1500 milliamp hour capacity, 15 to 1600, 700 cycles for the first. For 700 cycles, it will give up to 75% of its capacity for the first 700 cycles. Charge rate was definitely a little bit lower, 1.5C to 2C, so they really weren't high quality cells. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit lost with my information here. So, so the 18650V, yeah, they delivered 10C or 15 to 16 amps. 700 cycles is the expected lifetime, and they were using them from 2005 to 2011. Expected cycles was 1200 total before it just ends up not being worth it. Then there's the 18650 VT, and it was a lower capacity. Well, it wasn't a lower capacity, but at different C ratings, it delivered 1030 milliamp hours at 10C, 1080 milliamp hours at 1C, and up to 1300 at 0.1C. The max discharge rate is 15C or 17 to 20 amps and 30 amps for 30 seconds. Max discharge rate is up to 3C depending. No, max charge rate is 3C. Had a lower cycle count, 500. Had a slightly lower resistance. So it was a cell with less capacity but higher output power. So that was the difference between the two Sony cells, and it seemed like they you could get them cheaply. You can get them from salvage packs. Like I said, Dr. Bass in the forum was selling used Makita packs, and they typically had like one cell that was bad, so we could get them cheaply. They could deliver high power. Apparently these were magical cells that they didn't need balancing. They were a safe chemistry that never caught on fire. So, 18650 cells have been used in e-bikes for a long time, and so I think Dr. Bass ended up using a huge pack out of these cells, and then once it was like 25 amp hour at like 80 or 100 volts that he ended up using on one of his first builds. So there was so he did a lot of salvaging. He was a pioneer for like the 18650 movement, and so 18650 isn't bad. Cells or cylindrical cells aren't bad. There's high quality cells. There's low quality cells. You typically you need to basically source a good vendor for 18650. And there are several people on the forum and on Facebook that have bought in bulk or are unloading cells or have cells left over. You can build a nice small pack for nice small lightweight pack with decent range, and it will be relatively small. And especially once you get to higher amp hour cells, you'll be surprised how small the pack is. I think there's one vendor now that's called Calibike. He makes good 18650 packs out of like 2.2 amp hour cells. The quality is questionable, but he pretty much has a good fan base when it comes to e-bikes, batteries for electric bikes. So This isn't a platform, but that's like one of the vendors. All Cell is another vendor for 18650 batteries, but most of the time 18650 cells are pretty much a do-it-yourself thing. Um, and there's some vendors, some Alibaba vendors that will automatically um, do the tab welding for you and create 5 or 10 piece sections, and then you can solder the rest yourself. Um, and with 1860 cells, you can stack them in such an arrangement where they'll almost fit the contour of whatever shape that you're putting them in. So you're no longer restricted to just rectangular bricks or rectangular cells that don't fit in triangles or whatever shape that you put them, whatever the shape of your frame that you put them in, so you can kind of contour the pack to fit the shape of the frame. So that's another plus of those cells. I'm running a little bit over when it comes to time here, but as far as I know, I pretty much hit a lot of different packs and a lot of different cells and gave their background and history on those cells as the best of my ability. I mean, I wish I had somebody else to, interject and fill in the information that I missed or that might have been slightly wrong, but these are my opinion on the cells. As far as for e-bike use, I'll still continue to use Lipo cells because the weight, power to weight ratio, it can't be beat. But for the people that really want to save money in the long run, use lithium iron phosphate cells. If you don't need a lot of power, lithium iron phosphate cells will typically satisfy the 30 to 40 amp crowd, depending on what size battery you buy. Lithium is for pretty much the 40 to 60 to 80 to 100 to 150 amp crowd, because there's no other battery that can really deliver that much power except for 8123 lithium iron phosphate. And then 18650 cells are basically good for people that want a lightweight battery, want that battery pack to conform to some type of shape, or so like I said, 18650, they hide them in the frame. They build nice small rectangular packs. And it's not that 18650 is cheap. Like I said, they can be really, really expensive, but um, you can make it expensive or as inexpensive as you want. But typically, if you're looking for a lightweight bike, 18650 is kind of the way to go with lightweight and low power. Because even the Opti bike is using 18650 cells, and with enough 18650 cells in parallel, you can power a car like the Tesla. So they have their place. Even though these are small little bitty cells, slightly larger than a AA battery, they have their place. They have their power. You put enough in parallel, you can move some things. So that's not to be discredited. So Lipo for power, lithium iron phosphate for longevity, and 18650 for just flexibility, lightweight application. Those are the things that I will kind of use those for. So that's all I got for now. I would like to pick this back up later with some other people. But until then, this will have to do. Thanks for listening.